So I've served as a special agent as well as a period of time as a supervisory special agent. And currently I'm assigned to the Salt Lake City Division and work out of Boise, Idaho.
Now, prior to becoming a special agent with the FBI, did you have other law enforcement experience?
I did. I served as a deputy U.S. Marshal for 9 years prior to working for the FBI.
Now, as an agent with the FBI, have you been serving as a cast field asset?
Yes. So I'm a member of what's called the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, or CAST for short. And it's a specialty that utilizes cellular records as a part of investigations, trying to determine where a phone was whenever that has any significance to a criminal investigation.
How long have you been doing that?
I've been certified since October of 2019.
Okay. When you were working for the U.S. Marshals, did you do any work with cellular phones there?
I did. I was assigned to locating fugitives for a significant period of time with my career with the Marshal Service. And so I was able to use cell phone records to aid in locating fugitives successfully on several hundred occasions.
Can you tell us the education or training that you have to become a CAST member?
Yeah, so for the FBI with CAST, it starts with an application process where you would express interest in getting into the program. And then there's multiple trainings that you would go through before you're considered certified. It would start with our basic course, which is a 2-day course. During that course, you're looking at cellular theory and discussing the different cellular providers that, the major ones in the United States, and looking at records and putting those records onto a map. If you complete that successfully, you would go to our advanced course. In the advanced course, it's a little bit more in depth than basic, talking about some of the same topics, but you're also provided practical tests that you have to turn in, and then those tests are graded. At the conclusion of the advanced course, if you complete that successfully, you would go on to our what's called CIRA. It's a 3-day course, or was when I went through it, and it's our critical incident readiness exercise. So as a part of that training, there's no instruction. You're just presented with problems and practical scenarios that you would have to go through, map out records, and reach a conclusion. And it's supposed to simulate like a command post style environment where you're getting information rapidly as a part of the training in a short duration. If you complete that course, you would go to our 4-week certification, and that is extensive classroom lecture that includes radio frequency professors that are teaching about in the field of radio frequency. We also get instruction from the major providers in the United States for the cellular industry, to include their engineers as well as their subpoena compliance personnel. On top of that, we have a practical exercise that's assigned to us that we have to work from beginning to end, that culminates into testifying at the end and presenting a report and being challenged on that report, both by prosecution and defense that are simulated role players. At the conclusion of all of that, you would be considered certified as a member of CAST.
Do you have any annual recertification types of trainings to remain active as a CAST member?
Yes, so we have to complete a certain number of record analysis during that each year. And on top of that, we have a one-week certification conference that we attend each year that includes updates from the major providers in the cellular industry, as well as updates when it comes to the field of cellular technology from radio frequency engineers. And that's each year that you're in the program.
Okay. Have you previously testified as an expert in the area of cellular analysis?
Yes, ma'am, I have.
And as a CAST member?
Yes.
In this case, were you asked by the Gilbert Police Department to analyze some cell phone records?
I was.
Were you provided with cell phone records for a Lori Vallow for a 480, 489, 4652?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Were you provided with cell phone records for an Alexander Cox for the phone number 480-351-9120?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And were you provided with track phone records for a cell phone purchased from a Walmart in Idaho Falls, Idaho, with a phone number of 304-960-5998?
For that one, I was from track phone as well as from Verizon.
Okay. Were you also asked to include or analyze some Google historical location data associated with a Google account, homerjmaximus@gmail.com?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
Can you tell us what is historical location data?
Yeah, so Google offers a range of services with their products, and one of those being location history. So if you were to opt into location history on your Google account, what that would do is Google would maintain different locations that the device that's reporting that location information where it was historically. So if the user has that active, it would depend on the specific phone that was relaying that information to Google. So as an example, if I have a Google account and I have 3 different phones, I could access that Google account from all 3 of those phones, but if only one of them I've opted into location services, then any of the location history that Google maintained would only be associated with that specific phone for the location of where that phone was.
But the data overall from Google, they might provide information from all the devices, though, in terms of like searches that were done.
Correct. And again, it depends on how the user has their account set up with what information is going to be maintained by Google, specific to the many different products that Google has and offers to a user.
Okay. Were you asked to look at a specific time frame?
I was, specifically late September into early October in this case.
Did you create a report to help explain your process and explain the analysis of these cell phone records and these Google records?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And because it's on a thumb drive, I'm just going to share the first page. And it's 189, if I can have my paralegal. Does that look like your report that you created in response to the request by Gilbert Police Department?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
State will move to admit Exhibit 189.
Any objection to 189? All right, 189 submitted.
If I may publish. So starting on the first page of your report here, what did you include here for us to understand as part of your analysis and review of devices and phones?
So this is basically the cover sheet that I would put on all my reports, and it's showing the specific accounts that I did analysis for. So in this case, the 3 telephone numbers are listed at the top, one ending 4652, one ending 9120, and one ending 5998. Additionally, in this case, since I analyzed Google location history, the account that Google location history was associated with is listed. That's the homerjmaximus@gmail.com. The specific dates that I conducted analysis for, which in this case were September 25th, 2019 through October 3rd of 2019. The date that I completed my report, case number associated with the report with the FBI, and then my name.
Now, you were provided these records that from the Gilbert Police Department for these cell phone numbers. Did that include information like subscriber information?
It did, yes, ma'am.
So the 480, 489, 4652, when you reviewed those cell phone records from Verizon, did that show subscriber of Lori Vallow?
So it did not. It was subscribed through TrackPhone. So the name was not Lori Vallow, but there was an email address on the subscriber sheet associated with her.
Okay. The 480-351-9120, was that as a Verizon record Did you receive the Verizon or the track phone records?
I did, and that was subscribed to Alex Cox.
And the 304-960-5998, was that Verizon or track phone?
So it was subscribed through TrackPhone.
When we're talking about track phone and Verizon, and you talked about sort of major companies, how do those all interrelate?
Yeah, so when you're looking at cellular providers, you have two different categories looking at kind of from a wide perspective. You have companies that have infrastructure, like cellular towers that they maintain throughout the region that they provide service to. So Verizon is one of those companies. They have cell phone towers throughout the United States. When you're talking about TrackPhone, they're a mobile virtual network operator, which is basically means that they don't have cell phone towers, so they have to lease space with another network in order to provide service to their customers. So TrackPhone specifically in this instance was utilizing Verizon for the number ending 5998 to provide service to that customer.
And the Google records that you were provided for the Homer J. Maximus at gmail.com, did that provide subscriber information?
It did, and that was associated with Alex Cox.
The second page of your report, what is this telling us about in terms of your analysis and explanation?
Yeah, this is basically just explaining the methodology of how I created this report and the process that goes into place in order to take records from a provider like Verizon and then put those records onto a map. Again, this is the methodology of how that would be done.
The third page here, one of the things that stood out was the time. We've heard about universal time. When you are looking at most or all of these cell phone records, were you provided the times in universal time, UTC time?
Yeah, so depending on the provider or the company that's providing records, kind of the biggest difference that you'll see in the different records types is a lot of them will provide records in different time formats. So specific to Google, they provide their records in what's called UTC time. And so that's just a time standard to where if you wanted to do the conversion and see what time that was in the area where you're at, you would have to do a conversion depending on what location you were in order to get it into the local time.
So when you were mapping these cell phone records and these Google location device records, were you converting them for the purpose of your report into the local time, either Arizona or Idaho?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So while we're going through your report, all of those times will reflect either Idaho or Arizona, depending on where we're looking at.
Correct, and the report will reflect those times as well.
What do we see here, and what is this explaining to us?
So just to talk briefly about how cell phones work and kind of how we're utilizing the methodology that I spoke of to map and estimate where a phone was historically. One of the things that we look at is how far a cell phone tower provides coverage to. That's usually one of the major questions. So typically a cell phone tower density map is going to look very similar to a population density map. So here we're looking at the city of Phoenix, and as you can see, there's a couple of towers in downtown Phoenix and in the urban areas of Phoenix. Those towers are going to provide coverage to a much smaller area due to the number of users that are needing to access a particular carrier. As you get more to the rural areas, you can see that those towers are more spread out, and towers in rural areas are going to have a larger coverage area just because there's not as many people in those locations.
What is this page 5 reflecting?
This is just an example of what cell towers look like, not to insult anyone's intelligence, but if you look at the second tower from the left, traditionally back in the day, that's what we saw cell phone towers look like. Now there's more of a push to make them more aesthetically pleasing. So as you can see, like with the cactus, that's actually a cell phone tower, trying to disguise it so it's not looking like you have all this different metal around an area.
Page 6, what is this explanation for us in terms of what we've seen for your analysis?
Sure. So whenever I'm mapping a estimated location of where a phone was, I'm looking at a traditional tower has 3 sides. So if you look at the graphic on the left, you're looking at the tower itself, and then there's 3 sets of antenna facing 3 different directions on the tower. So if you look at the graphic on the right, that's looking from the top down. And so the cell tower is pushing out coverage kind of 360 degrees. But what providers do is they put different sets of antenna on that tower in order to optimize their network and divide that coverage up into different sectors. So whenever I'm looking at a call detail record and I'm seeing a particular call that might be of interest to an investigation, I would then look at the tower and sector that was used. So that way I can plot that tower onto a map and I can see what direction from the tower that specific sector is providing coverage to. So again, this is a traditional tower, but it's divided into 3 equal parts with sector 1, 2, and 3. And in my tower list, I'm able to see the tower that was used, and I'm able to see what's called an azimuth, which if you're not familiar with that, it's basically just showing me what the center line of a sector, what direction it is coming from the tower. So if you're looking at this particular graphic on the right, you can't see the 0, but it starts with 0 and goes all the way around to 360 degrees like a compass. So the center line of sector 1, that azimuth would be 0 degrees. Same thing with, if you look at sector 2, the azimuth on sector 2 would be 120 degrees. So that azimuth allows me to estimate the location of where a phone was in relation to where that tower is.
All right, so this information of the tower sectors and the azimuth, was that included with the cell phone records that were provided to you for those 3 phone numbers?
So it's included in a different file, but all of the different cellular providers that have towers throughout the United States, they have what's called a tower list that they update pretty regularly, at least every few months or quarterly. So in conjunction with the call detail records that show me who was called, at what date and time, what tower was used, I can marry that up with the tower list, and then I can have an estimate of where that phone was whenever it had that specific interaction with the network.
So someone like Verizon will provide you with, for that specific phone number, calls made and what tower they're using, and then you're able to then get the location of that tower from Verizon to map it.
Correct. If you think about, and everybody can still do this online, but back in the day when you had your cell phone, each billing cycle, you would get that bill in the mail. And it would be fairly thick because it included all the different calls that were made